GIs, most of the soldiers, would go from car to car and tell them about the rest of the soldiers about it, and tell them about it was Dreamsville, USA, and most of them at 2 o'clock in the morning were up and ready to get off to get something to eat. The conductor came through the car, and he said, everybody off the next station. Is about 2 o'clock in the morning. Everybody off to the next station for coffee, donuts, sandwiches, and cookies and apples, whatever. And one of the soldiers spoke up and said, "It's all free." And the conductor said, "Yeah, it's all free." And they, from all newcomers down on the way all the way in here, they kept shouting, "Hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray." So everybody's awake, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, this looked like a invasion of troops getting off the train, and it was great to see some of them even crying. They couldn't believe it. They were getting something to eat. They was that hungry, coming from California, New Mexico, Texas, and they were really hungry.
And when they stopped here, they were so glad to see us. And it just made us all real happy to go out there and serve. There was none of them were looked like they were downhearted, but most of them were so happy to see us. I think the idea of us giving them cookies and stuff made them really happy, so we enjoyed it.
They really weren't looking for any pretty girls in bathing suits at that time. The only thing they were doing was they were hungry and they wanted coffee, and we were more like mother figures than we were. You know, they missed their mothers more than they missed their girlfriends. Not as much as their wives, but then they missed their mothers more.
They were so gracious. They couldn't believe it that they had gotten things for nothing and that someone was that concerned about them. And it was the most gratifying thing that you ever knew.
And he said, "Well, they have a beautiful canteen there, and you go and tell your husband to get off and go and ask for some sandwiches and whatever, and some coffee." So he got off when we stopped, and never realizing that it was Dennison, we got 2 cups of coffee, 2 sandwiches. He got some other kind of goodies, which I don't know, and 2 donuts. And to me, the cup of coffee meant so much. When the depot was to be renovated, I was involved with it, never realizing that it was the canteen here that I stopped. And after I got helping with the renovation and doing volunteer work, it just dawned on me, gee, it looked kind of familiar. And then this was the only canteen next to Pittsburgh. And that is how I got to know about the canteen.
When this big troop train come by, these boys were all looking out the window, and they were, I thought they must be from Texas. They were so tall, you know, and happy-go-lucky. And they said, "I don't think you will want to feed us. We're not from Ohio." I says, "Where are you from?" Says, "We're from Texas." I says, "Aren't you Americans?" They says, "Sure." I says, "We'll be proud to serve you," and we did. They were thrilled to pieces. They couldn't believe it.
The canteen.
Well, it was the courtesy of the women that was working there and how they served them and everything like that. And it was kind of new to them because they hadn't run into anything like that anywhere else. And some of those fellows, I think, remember Dennison for the rest of their lives, probably.
On my trips back from Columbus, the greatest thing I remember was the wonderful conductor would come through and say, "Okay, boys, this is where you stop and get a lunch." And some of them would say, "We don't have any money." And he'd say, "Never fear, it's all free." And they, even if they were sleeping or anything, they got up and they were just tickled and so thankful.
These soldiers were loved and cared for. And I have the greatest heartfelt thanks to the Salvation Army.
Seeing the happy faces as we served them, because many of them were, you know, far, far from home. And if we could give them a little love and encouragement and the food.
I get a lot of people to the museum saying, well, why did they call it Dreamsville? And I guess if you were to put yourself in the shoes of the soldiers and you had been on a train for days, nothing to eat, homesick, and heading to war, which is very frightening, to pull up in the middle of nowhere and not know where you were and be greeted by all these women with waves and smiles and free food, it really was like a dream come true. So that's why they called it Dreamsville, and they called it right then, there during the war, and it was known across the country as Dreamsville. So the stories that the people have told, the soldiers and the women, you piece these all together and you come up with a very important part of our history here. And it's not just the history of Dennison, it's the history of the whole county, and it's in a way the history of the country. It's the American way. It's what they were doing here. It was the effort on the home front.
And over the 5 years that saw more than 1 million soldiers pass through the canteen, special memories remain with those who were there.
Sometimes you get a lump in your throat when you see them going, because you know they were going into the war, and waving at them, you'd get a lump in your throat, right? And knowing that you had your brothers or your brother-in-laws in the service, it made you feel good that you could serve them, and you'd get a lump in your throat.
The trains were usually running late to start with, and the conductor didn't have much patience to wait, so often they did not get their goodies all passed out in time to get off the train before they whistled the train out of the station. And a few times, I recall one of the ladies didn't get off, and the conductor, she spotted the conductor in time that he stopped the train down by the 3rd Street crossing down there and let her off. And 2 or 3 days later, another lady was left on the train, and she went through to Newcomerstown, and they had to go get her. And then the third one went to Steubenville, was hauled.